Hello, good afternoon, everybody. I have with me today two of the most formidable minds I have heard about, read about. Just a little intro into about Vikram. Vikram right now is Sampath is right now on the eye of a storm, if I may say so, being sued for plagiarism, which I don't think was correct. Sorry, that's my opinion. We have Mr. Rajeev Gowda, planning genius, and one of the founders of the planning school, and also who has an internship program for students, which on to understand politics, political activism. Am I right? Okay. So let's start with Vikram. You have been. People say that. I mean, there has been a certain section of people who say that you have a Hindutva point of view, especially in writing about Savarkar. Now, that there is a contradiction in that, I believe, because you have done a very eclectic number of books, from the Wadiyars to John to a lot of people. Now, how do you really think that the Indian mind is colonized?
Uh, Good afternoon, everyone, and it's a great pleasure and honor to be here. And thank you to the Indian Express Group for inviting me to this session. I think the subtitle of this session is what we are probably focusing on. We don't know what the epic idea is, and Mr. Gowda and I were discussing this in the green room. I think the crux of this session is on decolonization. And when we talk of decolonization, let's go to the first part. Colonization, in simple terms, is when you make a country other than your own a source of your raw materials and also a market for your finished products, in addition to political sway over that country. But in addition to political and economic control of another country, there's a third dimension which we seldom consider, and that is cultural subjugation. And this cultural subjugation or subordination of another country and culture happens through multiple ways. The colonized subjects, language, belief systems, traditional knowledge systems, epistemology, production and dissemination of knowledge in that country, their history, their religion, their belief systems, all of this made to be felt inferior to the colonized master. So while the political and the economic colonization can be shrugged off easily through, probably relatively easily, through mass movements like what happened in India during the freedom struggle, the cultural subjugation is a slower process to get rid of. And the reason is, for centuries and for generations perhaps, the subconscious mind is made to believe this, because the colonizer's attempt is not only to introduce this, but also to make the colonized start somewhere subliminally believing in this thing, that we are inferior. So a lot of post-colonial societies such as India are in a constant state of flux because of this on the cultural arena. And how long this will last depends on several factors: political, social, economic factors, how many waves of colonization happened, what is the identity crisis that that particular society has, and so on. So many Latin American countries, African countries, and I think even China to a large extent has managed to shrug off this cultural subordination and getting back to your own identity, and your native roots. But a lot of countries of the erstwhile Indian subcontinent, the undivided India, are, in my view, lagging behind. So the decolonization of the Indian mind, so to say, is a work in progress. And when we're talking of decoloniality, it is not, I would emphasize, with a sense of hatred for someone, or with a sense of xenophobia or a hatred for the West, or it's not a discourse against somebody, but it needs to be a discourse and a discussion of looking within your own systems and how you can get back to your roots. Can that native identity assert itself through labels, through lexicons, through ideas and ideologies that it will decide, and it will not be imported by another society on it? So I think that, to me, is the sum and substance of what decolonization means. And in that sense, we are still, as I said, a work in progress.
Rajiv, let me swing the question to you. America was a colony, the British colony. Australia, Canada. Do they have this decolonization problem? Because they seem to be pretty relaxed about the UK. And they also seem to be mildly, amused with the things Britain does. So why is it that if India, as Gautam says, the mind has to be decolonized?
America, Australia were populated by people who were essentially the same as the mother country. And so they didn't really have a major cultural difference. If anything, the people who should be talking about decolonization are the Native Americans, and they don't really have much of a say. If you were expecting fireworks, you'll actually be surprised that I agree with what Vikram has said. But I want to take it much further. I want to point out that colonization is not just about exploitation of resources and subjugation, it's also about what he talked about, feelings of inferiority, limitations in people's minds which come in the way of their aspirations, right? And so when you talk about decolonizing people's minds, we want to liberate them from the barriers that are preventing them from unleashing their potential. Yesterday was International Women's Day. Why do we have that? Because societies across the world historically have kept women in a secondary position. And that has become something that is internalized by a lot of them, right? I used to teach at IIM Bangalore, and I would discuss some of these complicated issues, especially issues related to reservation, not by talking about caste, but talking about gender. I would say, if you think that there's a level playing field, why do we have only 15% women in this class, right? In my MBA class. And then they would say, oh, yes, there's societal pressure, people are pushed in a particular direction. And so really the challenge is, how do you break those barriers and move forward? One sec, let me just finish. I also mentioned the word caste and reservation, right? If you think about that, that's another system that's been in place in India forever. And every few 100 years, 1,000 years, we're starting with the Buddha, coming up with Basavarna, you have social reform movements which try to break those barriers that have kept people in certain professions, in certain roles, and prevented them from aspiring for something else, right? So the larger story really is about how do we go beyond where we are to truly liberate ourselves and embrace the diversity of our cultures and knowledge and our language and the richness that is India, which inadvertently gets colonized by either the English language or the dominant regional language. I mean, there's just so much out there, okay? Or even some dominant cultural practice. So it's a very complicated thing. And a lot of that has happened not necessarily through design, but it's just happened because of the way life goes on. And there's always a good point to try and turn things around.
All right, you answered the question I was about to ask, so let's move on. Currently, the battlefield of history is the independence years and the people who have participated in the independence during the independence struggle. Now, whether it be Godse or whether it be on Savarkar as he wrote, the nuances are missing. I'm not here, I'm not defending Godse at all, but understanding Godse has never been a great priority for, the established academic situation. Then why did he do that? Godse was a man who loved Gandhi. Godse was a man who kind of took Gandhi as a father figure. But Godse did feel tremendously betrayed by the establishment, the Congress or Gandhi. I mean, he felt betrayed because he had been to the partition period. He had been to kind of in Hyderabad when there was a lot of massacre and stuff going on. Now that was what prompted to kind of kill Godse. Now, and again, yesterday Shashi Tharoor spoke about the binary perceptions of it. I mean, it is that. I do think that Gautam could have put a little bit more of nuances in his book on Savarkar, which I just skimmed through. Which I just skimmed through. No, Gautam was a friend of mine who looks like you, so that it just kind of clicked on that. Now, why is it that this binary perception exists? Because Savarkar was a strategist. He had a strategic mind. So, I mean, the way I read it is that what he talked about compromising with the British was more of a strategy to kind of get his agenda through. And he had participated in all kinds of activities against the British Empire. So, is it because he belonged to a particular kind of worldview that he was demonized rather than, so I.
Yeah. With your permission, I'd like to probably expand it beyond, because this is, I think, not so much of a discussion only on Savarkar, but I'll bring that in some flavor. But I think history as a very important tool of colonization, as a sense where the colonizer made you to feel that, they had almost a natural right to rule over you. So a lot of the myths that we've been fed, like right from the mythical Aryan invasion theory, which now subsequent genetic discoveries, archaeological excavations at Rakhigadi and Sanauli and so many other places have increasingly shown the facts are in a different direction. But then a lot of these myths were perpetuated during our colonial past only to make us feel that you are not even capable of ruling yourself. Right from your earliest civilization, there have been people who have come from outside, they have subjugated you, and so it's just par for the course. What we, the British, are doing is the same thing. It's a continuum. You had the Turks, you had the Mongols, you had the Mughals, you had all kinds of people who came in, and you were an open field for defeat. So the history of India is also shown as a long laundry list of defeats, where we only seem to have lost battles, but then if we are around as a civilization, there must have been some battles that we won also. And so these things do not even come into common discourse. And similarly, the freedom struggle, which is also an important aspect of our history, where we are shown a very, very linear, monochromatic, and a simplistic narrative of what freedom struggle meant. With I often say it's like that Attenborough film. It just goes from frame to frame. But there were numerous unsung heroes, heroines, multiple strands. The dominant, non-violent strand notwithstanding, there were armed rebellions right from 1857 to the last war of independence, the naval mutiny in 1946. And these are the subaltern voices of Indian freedom struggle. But one more point I'd like to mention, because it is about history, is about this whole idea that a lot of us educated Indians also, somewhere subliminally, we are taught to believe that India is an artificial product. It is not even it was stitched together by the British. There was this infamous statement of Sir John Strachey, who was a British administrator in the 1880s in charge of the Imperial Civil Services, and while teaching the newbies of the civil services, he used to say the first and the most important thing to note about India is that there is not an India and there never was an India. So just imagine, even today, a lot of educated Indians, without any malice, without any political prejudices, we believe that before that we were a land of disparate princely states, all fighting with each other. But it was the British who came and gave us that sense of nationhood, who gave us reforms, who gave us railways, who gave us hospitals, who gave us education, civil services, and we are a product of a benefactor who's come from outside. That is the problem when we look at our past. That is the problem when we look at history from a colonized lens.
Unfortunately, I've been asked to wind up this session. It would have been, highly interesting to go on and on. But we have 5 minutes. Rajeev has given us 5 minutes. So what do you think you have the excellent initiative to kind of teach children about politics. Now, you can't teach politics without teaching history, right? I mean, without an understanding of history, you cannot understand politics, and vice versa. So, I mean, this whole demonization of people who have not fought with the Congress, because the Congress dominates the freedom struggle narrative. So, do you think it's a fair thing to do when the whole kind of decolonization thing is going on?
So, when you're trying to decolonize, when you're trying to get rid of where you found yourself, you have to provide an alternative vision for how you're going to build the country. That vision is our constitutional project, and that constitutional project, as you would know in your preamble, has a vision of India which does not give primacy to any religion. It treats everyone as equal. It says there are certain goals and aspirations that we need to fulfill: justice, social, economic, and political. If it was already there, why would we have to put it in there? There's a word there called fraternity, which is under great threat today. Fraternity means that we all live as brothers and sisters happily, and that's hardly what's going on, right? So basically, what this whole constitutional project is about building a nation over decolonizing by getting rid of those barriers that have been put in place by caste and gender discrimination and language discrimination, whatever else. And the focus is on the future, not necessarily only on history. Because history you can keep rewriting, you can keep fighting, and all about that. But the basic thing about the future is, how do we, if you want to recapture this glory, or you want to create this glory for the first time, which is a modern India that is, on par with the best of the world. And that's what we've already managed to do in certain fields, especially in education and IT and some of those domains. And from where the kind of poverty that we found ourselves in 1947 to where we've come in 75 years is an extraordinary amount of progress that we've achieved. Debunking and trashing that is also a tremendously stupid activity. And the students of WhatsApp University are not serving themselves well by actually falling for that kind of, it's a new kind of colonization of their minds when they fall for misinformation and disinformation and trash the extraordinary contributions of everyone who built this country and who are continuing to do so, and even more so when you don't have an understanding of those nuances of the freedom struggle that you talked about, because those circumstances called for certain actions, certain ideologies, certain sacrifices, certain patterns. And the difference between the author of his biography and the stream of ideology that I belong to is that we focus on inclusion and we focus on treating everyone, man, woman, religion, caste, everyone as equal. And we want to create an India where these divisions, where we decolonize our minds and we celebrate the diversity and strengths of India.
But didn't the Congress try that for so many years? It didn't manage.
Absolutely. Have we not seen transformations in terms of women's progress? Panchayati Raj, if you go to a village and you see that a Dalit woman has been elected the chief, in a place which was always filled with hierarchy, that is breaking every colonial mindset problem that you have. Those things you need to learn to appreciate. I need to see the audience applauding those kinds of transformations. Instead, we look at it from the point of view of our own caste and say, oh, we are threatened by reservation or something like that. The point is, there are crores of Indians who have fallen behind. You need to give them a chance to unleash their potential. That's what the Congress has done, whether with Panchayati Raj, with reservations, with numerous other initiatives. And it's not just the Congress. This is part of everyone who has believed in the constitutional agenda. We've done it together.